So Margaret, thank you very much for making time to share your insights into the future of leadership. But before we walk into the future, can you tell us a little bit about your own background? Where did you grow up?
So, Dr. Nick, thank you so much for having me this morning. It's such an honor to spend some time with you, and thank you for the wonderful work that you are doing. I think now more than ever, we need these good news stories. So, such a pleasure to spend some time with you. So, thank you. So, Dr. Nick, so I grew up in Bloemfontein, right, which is, most people will know where that is, kind of in the center of South Africa in the Free State. And I studied there to become a chartered accountant. So my dad is a professor in psychology, and as a daddy's girl, I really always wanted to follow in his footsteps and become a psychologist. But that career path kind of changed for me, and so I studied at the Free State University, which I did because I got a bursary to study there, and my parents were both working at the university there. But yeah, so now I'm married to John, and I'm lucky that he keeps me honest and grounded. And I also have two lovely girls, Sophia and Grace, twin girls, who are turning 9 in 2 weeks' time, and definitely my biggest cheerleaders. But yeah, so I'm a girl from Bloemfontein in the Free State.
And tell us, Margaret, what was your dream career when you grew up?
So, Dr. Nick, I always was determined to start working at an early age because I wanted the independence and the freedom to be able to make my own decisions in life. And so from finishing university, I was driven by having that financial independence as well. But I think for me, it was always about having an opportunity to make a difference. And to be in areas where, I could use my influence and perhaps leadership in certain roles to have a positive influence on the people around me and the society in which I worked. And so, as I said, initially I thought being a psychologist would be the best opportunity to do so. And I always said to my mom, I want to be able to work somewhere where I can show up and where I can be present every day, and feel motivated and surrounded by people where there's a positive momentum. But yeah, so the psychologist route kind of morphed into becoming a chartered accountant because my dad in his wisdom said to me, if I have the financial background, I can pretty much go and do anything in my career. And I think so the combination between psychology and a love for people and understanding what makes them tick, and then the financial background did kind of open the doors for me to say, I can really go and pursue any career that I want.
And Margaret, can you tell us who inspired you in your early days?
So, Dr. Nick, my parents quoted to me from a very early age a wonderful quote by Walt Disney that said, if you can dream it, you can do it. And I think that one of the greatest gifts that I've been given in my life is to have been surrounded by people who believed in me, starting with my parents, that made me think that, I can really do anything that I want to in my life, and that there's no challenge too big to overcome. And so I'd say, probably for a very vast majority of my life, my parents were that inspiration to me. And then, I've been very fortunate, and I'll talk a bit about that, to work for great leaders who believed in me. And then, I'm very fortunate to also have a husband, as I said, who keeps me honest, and, a family and my daughters as well, who make sure that I do things for the right reasons.
And Margaret, today you are a globally recognized leader in your industry. You've won a number of awards. You've been awarded the most influential woman in business and government. And you've been the president of the Insurance Institute. Looking back over your career, would you say there was a turning point, or maybe a number of turning points where things could have gone different?
Yeah. So, Dr. Nick, I would say that there were probably 2 or 3 turning points, and each of those turning points were enabled or facilitated by leaders who gave me a chance to do something that I had never done before because they believed in me. And I think from my perspective, because I knew they were taking a risk on me for their own reputations, I wanted to make sure that I didn't let them down. And so it became a two-way street of them taking a chance on me, and I think me giving it my everything to make sure that I lived up to those expectations and I didn't let them down in terms of taking a chance on me. But I think, if I reflect back on my career, when I was in my early 20s, Steve Murphy, who was the chief executive of the Hanover Insurance Group, you might know them well. They're based in Hanover in Germany. And I walked into a new job, and at the same time, the 3 leaders above me who reported into the chief executive all resigned at the same time. And Steve said to me, "Okay, show us what you can do. And I'm going to put some seasoned people around you, but I believe in you as a leader." And so that definitely was an early turning point in my career to give me some great exposure very early on. And then I would say that a second turning point for me was definitely within Standard Bank when Sim Chabalala, who's the chief executive there, took a chance on me in terms of running the wealth portfolio. And again, I think I was in a role, wealth was created. The first leader of that portfolio left after a year, and the second leader left after, I think, 11 months. And so something was obviously going wrong in that role. And again, Sam kind of surprised me by calling me in one early morning on the 2nd of May, which I think is now, a couple of years ago to the day, and said to me, "Listen, I want you to take on this role, but I'm not going to give it to you. I'm going to put you in an acting capacity because you also have to prove to everybody else, not just me, that he's making the right decision." And of course, he was a bit bruised by the fact that the previous chief executives left. And I have to tell you, he put me in that acting role for 8 months, which is an awful long time when people start questioning you to say, don't they have faith in you? Are they not sure about you? Are you going to get the role? And we kind of ended up in a situation where everyone was saying to Sim, "Listen, she's not doing a bad job. We think you should give her the job." And that's when Sim said, "Okay, I've achieved what I wanted to, because now it's not just my decision to give you the job." But he made me suffer for 8 months, I can tell you. And with hindsight, it's the best thing that he could have done, to see whether I could have persevered and sort of hold my head high despite people asking me all the time, "Why haven't they appointed you yet?" So it's interesting how these things that are such big challenges at the time become big turning points in your career.
And tell us, when you were voted most influential woman in business, what were the criteria? What would you say is making you influential in your industry?
So, Dr. Nick, I think at the end of the day, it boils down to holistic thinking and holistic influence. That it's being able to find that balance between your people, your clients, financial performance, being in tune with people's emotions, being authentic, being sincere, playing a role in terms of the societies in which we operate, so the communities, being able to roll up your sleeves, sort of get your hands dirty to make sure that you play an impact. And I think, especially when I was interviewed for those awards, the focus was very much on this ability to think holistically. And I've always been such a keen supporter of diversity and whole brain thinking. And maybe it's because I grew up in a home where, I had a dad who was doing brain profiling on everyone who would care to do it. But it was this deep belief in the power and the value of diversity, which is obviously, it's not just race and gender. I mean, those are very, very important, but it's also the ability to appreciate those people who think differently from what we do. And in fact, to surround yourself with those people who typically irritate you because they see things from a different perspective and they're challenging you in terms of how you see things. And those can create very uncomfortable situations. But I think if you can understand the value of people who see the world completely different from the way you do, and if you can build a trust environment, we can listen to one another, it is just so incredibly powerful.
So Margaret, what would you say is driving you today?
So, Dr. Nick, so I get inspired and fueled by a lot of the people that I work with to make sure that we show up as a diverse and authentic team. And I feel so incredibly blessed at the moment. And we've recently had a change in responsibility and accountability within the Standard Bank Group from a leadership perspective. So all of us have slightly new portfolios. And I think that the portfolio that I manage now, I probably am surrounded by the most amount of greatness that I've ever been surrounded by in a team, because I really feel like we have a team of experts who are very diverse in how they see the world, who have embraced their authenticity and who are brave enough to show up as themselves, and who are brave enough to challenge all of us, most of all me, to disagree. But we do so in the spirit of playing the ball, not the player, and showing up as a united force and a powerful force at the end of the day, because we're able to disagree from one another through our own authenticity. And I think for me, that is just so incredibly powerful, because you don't have to constantly look over your shoulder to see, what's really going on, what's the real underlying dynamic, or what politics are at play. I really feel like we have a team who are committed to the end goal, but who are authentic. And I think that's, one of the biggest challenges and opportunities for the future is that true authentic leadership, and people finding themselves in a situation where, even though they're inspired by role models out there, they use that inspiration to show up as their true selves and not try and be like someone else, dress like somebody else, speak like somebody else, but to use their own powers to be successful.
Now, Margaret, looking into the future, and I know it's a big question, but what does the future of leadership mean to you?
So, Dr. Nick, based on what I've just said, I probably would categorize it into 5 buckets. And for me, the first one, which will be no surprise, is authenticity, right? Creating an environment where people can be their best self. The second one is empathy. And I think now more than ever, being in tune with what's going on around us, not just for our employees, but very much for our clients, to say, what are they going through and what are we trying to solve for? And before we get too caught up in, future solutions, do we really understand and cater for their basic needs that they want us there for? The third one, which is a big one to me, is vulnerability. So being able as leaders to show up as also being vulnerable, challenges in our own lives, things that we're battling with, reasons for us to go for counseling, that going for counseling is actually a strength to build ourselves up. I spoke about playing the ball and not the player, and I think that's only possible if we create a trusted environment. So I would say those 5 things: authenticity, empathy, vulnerability, playing the ball and not the player, and holding people ruthlessly accountable for doing so, and then trust, creating a trusted environment, so that we create a platform where people can embrace diversity.
Now, Margaret, as a future leader yourself, who was, so to speak, raised by great leaders, what is it that you've learned from your own leadership journey that you consider really important for building future leaders?
So I often talk about the importance and the integration to people about mind, body, and soul, and how all of these things kind of have to align for us to be able to be successful and at peace with where we are. And I think, for me, from a mind perspective, obviously diversity across the spheres of thinking, race, gender, and everything else that goes with diversity is critically important for teams to be successful. I think it's so important that we promote one another, stand up for one another, listen to one another. One of my proudest moments was I had a catch-up meeting with one of the team members, and it wasn't a lady who was reporting directly into me. Her name was Sam Aref. And Sam came to see me one day and she said, I wanted to share a story with you, which is that she was in a situation where she felt uncomfortable as a woman in terms of how some people were showing up in their thinking from an opportunity perspective. And she said to me she was very comfortable to challenge the thinking around the table, because she knew that if the fact that she was challenging them was escalated to me, she knew that I would stand up for her. And so she felt confident and comfortable to raise those issues. And I thought, if we can create such an environment where if issues come up, people feel confident to challenge because they know that the leadership will back them, then I think that'll make all of us very proud. And I'd say another issue that to me, from a mind perspective, was such a powerful lesson is that many years ago, I was speaking to a group of women leaders, and there was a male facilitator, and they were asking me, have I ever felt intimidated by being a woman in a predominantly male environment in financial services? And I said to them, I've never thought about myself as showing up as a woman. I'm just thinking about myself as showing up as Margaret, and I need to be successful and have impact and make a difference in the lives of the people that I touch. But it's never been to me about, I need to prove myself as a woman. It's just, I need to prove myself as for who I am. And the gentleman who was facilitating the session said to me afterwards, I've got 3 daughters, and I'm going to go home and tell them tonight that if it's not an issue to you, it's not an issue to others. But as soon as you're uncomfortable with who you are, doesn't matter what your minority status is, people will sense that and it'll become an issue to them. And I think for me, that was just, such a powerful reminder to say, we just got to show up as our best and make sure we prove we can be successful for who we are, not necessarily because of a minority group that we represent. And then I'd say from a soul perspective, I was on an aeroplane in the good old days when we were still flying around the world, and there was a Time magazine in the seat pocket, and on the front cover was Serena Williams, and it was just after she'd given birth and had quite a difficult birth, and the caption was, nothing about me is perfect right now, but I'm perfectly Serena. And I thought, it just captures it so well, in that we always think other people's lives are perfect, and it's so easy to get caught up in this neighbor envy. It doesn't matter in which sphere it is in your life, but just to know that, we all have tough times. We all go through difficulties, be it personally or at work. And we've all got to find ways to work through that, and within the Standard Bank Group, we've got access to a service called ICAS. I think many corporates do. And it's the power to say, it's as I mentioned earlier in the interview, to say it's not a weakness to ask for help. It's a real strength to say, listen, I'm actually battling to deal with this issue and I need help. I need to speak to somebody. And I think, in terms of looking after ourselves and our souls, I think, that's such an important thing. I was once at a theme park with my daughters, and it was a theme park where you could get fast passes. And there was a very popular ride that my girls really wanted to do, and we managed to get fast passes for the morning. And then we missed the time frame to utilize the fast pass. And when we went back there, the queue was 90 minutes long, so 90 minutes long. And I said to the girls, wow, you know, we can't go and stand in this queue. And Grace said to me, Mommy, why don't you just go and tell them that we had a fast pass, but that we missed it, and just ask them if there's any chance they would let us through in the fast pass queue. So off we went, and I asked the lady, and she said, no problem, you can go through. And Grace said to me, you see, Mommy, if you don't ask, you don't know. And I must tell you that that very same principle applies to corporates, and that I think in any environment that we find ourselves, the world has moved on. Gone are the days where people are going to come to us and ask us, oh, do you want to do this? Are you interested in this opportunity? You know, there's just too much talent around. And I think for those people who want to succeed and move forward, you actually have to put your hand up and say, you know, how can I get involved? How can I help? How can I get my hands dirty? So that people can notice you, you know, and give you those opportunities. But I think that the world has moved on a lot. And so I'm always telling people, if you don't ask, you don't know. The answer might be no, but that's okay. There'll be another opportunity that will come your way.
Oh, this is very powerful, Margaret. Just ask. Maybe you should coin a quote around that. It's something we need to do a lot more. And tell us, when you speak to aspiring leaders, and maybe even your children, what is it you tell them about social media? How should they navigate social media to build their own leadership brand?
Yeah. So, Dr. Nick, you know, I think there's a big divide whether people are fans of the royal family, right? But a lot of us have watched with interest in the media recently the passing of Prince Philip. And one of the things that I saw he often said is, talk to the media by all means, but not about yourself. And so I think if your primary motivation is to promote yourself, then you really are asking for trouble. I think if your motivation is to inspire others, you know, be vulnerable in terms of some of the lessons you've learned, and make sure you can take people on the journey with you, then you can have impact. And I think that's important. So sometimes we have to share some of our own stories and our personal stories to make sure that we can take other people on the journey, open doors for them. You know, maybe some things that they can take away from some of your lessons, but it shouldn't be about promoting you. And I think one of the things that really scare me about social media is now that this new generation is growing up, you know, when I was growing up and when I started my career, social media wasn't dominant as it is now. Yet we're seeing so many stories now of young leaders who are being promoted into very senior roles, they in their mid or to late 20s. And suddenly people are digging up things that they said when they were in their teens and carefree and thought they can say whatever they want to in the world. And they're actually being fired from those roles because they said things that were inappropriate. And so I think the other danger is that there might be things that are sort of borderline acceptable now that in a few years' time will be completely socially unacceptable. But if you said it in the wrong context, you know, it's going to catch up with you. And so I would say to people that social media is very powerful and should be used, but you've got to be very careful in terms of what format and what platform you use it for. And, you know, we've seen some very serious cases from a corporate perspective where people thought they said things in their personal capacity, but they still got themselves into a whole lot of trouble because these days there's no divide between what's personal and what's business. You know, it's all the same thing. You're all representing the same thing. And so I think social media is a great thing. I think it's opened up, you know, so many new opportunities for the world to move forward. But I would just say that people have to be so careful in terms of how they use it.
Now, Margaret, what is your advice for future leaders when it comes to challenges? What are some of the biggest challenges future leaders should expect to encounter in their career?
So I think one of the biggest challenges, but probably I would say one of the biggest opportunities is self-awareness. So I think that gone are the days where you need all the technical skills to be able to do certain jobs, because the world has opened up. Financial services is embracing non-financial services. Non-financial services companies are embracing financial services as a way and a means of additional revenue streams. So, gone are the days where you can only join a bank because you know banking, or you can only join a cloud provider because you understand cloud computing. I think everyone's embracing the fact that we need all kinds of skills. And so really the universe has opened up for everybody. However, if you go into these new worlds without the right level and openness to self-awareness in terms of saying, how am I showing up? What do I need to learn? Where do I need to pull in people who are better than me? Where do I need to ask for help? If you can't do those things, I think that the system will just get rid of you, because we need people who can lean in, but we also need people who are wise enough to say when they don't have enough experience and they need to get better expertise to supplement them and not see that as a weakness. And I think linked with this self-awareness, I was very fortunate at the time when I worked for Hanover Insurance. Steve sent us for a leadership course at the Leadership Academy at Disney in Orlando, which was a wonderful experience. But one of the things that stood out to me there was they said to us that we judge ourselves by our intentions, but others by their actions. So we judge ourselves by our intentions and others by their actions. And so I think if your actions don't display your intentions, then it's not good enough. And you need to be very aware to say, I can't reflect on this and say, so maybe they misunderstood what I was trying to do, but it's okay because my intentions were good. If your intentions don't translate into the right actions, then it's not actually okay. And so I think you require a lot of self-reflection and self-awareness to be strong enough to say, is that actually happening? I would also say you've got to surround yourself by people who are better at what they do than what you are. And so surround yourself by greatness is such a critical part of success. But I think that people who are too proud or too ego-driven can't do that. They can't be open to bringing in people who can threaten them or threaten taking over their job. But you've got to do that if you want to be successful. And then I think also being open to feedback. The only way for us to really get better is to being open to very direct feedback from people, and not being defensive, as hard as it may be sometimes, but to really embrace that and see it as an opportunity to grow.
So Margaret, when it comes to mentoring, what are your tips or maybe lessons you would give to young mentees?
So, Dr. Nick, every night when my daughters go to bed and they pray, they ask for 4 things. And they say, help me to be kind, have courage, be grateful, and tell the truth. And I think those 4 disciplines apply as much to the junior school playground as they do to any corporate or business environment. So be kind, have courage, be grateful, and tell the truth. And I think, being kind is such an understated phrase, and it's never been more relevant than what it is now during this COVID time, to be kind to the people around us, because you just don't know what they're going through. And then I would say, one of the things that have become, or 2 things that have become really critical in a work environment is simplicity and storytelling. And one of my favorite quotes is by Winston Churchill, who said, I'm writing you a long letter because I didn't have time to write you a short letter. It's not easy to summarize things quickly. For you to really get the essence of what you're trying to say in a short well-packaged way, it takes time. You've got to work it, rework it, rework it, rework it to make sure that it's got impact. And I think that people don't take the time to really condense what they're trying to say. And so they write these long pieces and nobody really knows what they mean. So I think the future really is all about simplicity. You know, people have got no tolerance anymore for people who want to try and seem clever through the use of buzzwords or future-ready words. So simplicity and then storytelling. We see more and more that people are getting rid of presentations or documents. They want to be able to listen, sit in front of you, whether it's in a board meeting or otherwise, and say, tell me a story. Take me on this journey with you. And then let me challenge you and let's have a conversation around it. But I think one of the big dangers in this era that we're living in is complexity and the fact that people don't understand things. And I think that the tolerance levels for that is running out. And so there's a wonderful challenge for young people to say, how can I get better at simplicity and how can I get better at storytelling?
Now, Margaret, you mentioned a couple of your own role models, your own mentors. Looking back over your leadership journey, are there any other role models of leadership that you would recommend future leaders should learn from?
So, Dr. Nick, I would quote Oscar Wilde to you, who said, be yourself because everyone else is taken. And so I think for me, you know, yes, I often read about things that are being said by people who've achieved great things. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're a role model for me, but I take from them the piece that can inspire me to become better at who I am. And so, you know, I would say to young leaders that I'm not going to put poster childs in front of you to say, you know, these are the people you need to go and learn from. I think you've got to go and absorb as much as you can around you, but with the real focus of being the best at who you can be. And so I think this, you know, opportunity for us in this new world to be authentic to who we are and to be proud of it is such a wonderful evolution in how the world is showing up. But so I wouldn't name anyone in particular. I think there's so many people out there that we can learn from. But the biggest challenge to all of us is to become the best at ourselves.
Now, Margaret, how can our listeners connect with you and where should they follow you?
So Dr. Nick, you and I met on LinkedIn. You know, I'm on LinkedIn and so a lot of people do reach out to me via LinkedIn. And I think, you know, for me, that's an active tool that I use, and I think a very professional one. I don't really serve on many other forms of social media, but I think LinkedIn is a good one. And then I think through there, you know, we've built some powerful connections. And so I look forward to hearing from people.
And last but not least, Margaret, is there one piece of advice that you would really like to convey to future leaders that they should implement in their own life and leadership?
I mean, so Dr. Nick, you know, let me just say firstly to you, you know, thank you for the opportunity to share these thoughts with you, and thank you for the inspiration that you give to so many others, including myself, just through the way that you show up and, you know, the positivity. I think that's really incredible. And so thank you for that. I think, you know, in a complex world where everyone's just trying to survive, you've got to recognize the things that are important and not neglect those. I mean, to me, it's family, and I work very hard to make sure that I don't get my priorities wrong when it comes to what's important. But I think that's always a challenge to people to find that right level of balance. But I would say that the biggest gift that we can give to people around us is to truly believe in them and to believe that they are capable of greatness. And, you know, there's an old cliche that says, believe in the people around you because what you believe is what they will become. And you've got to do that with sincerity. you know, I've yet to meet a person in my life who doesn't shine through affirmation. Yeah, all of us need affirmation. All of us need to know we're on the right track, we're doing the right things, we're making a difference. And, you know, so often we can sit and wait for the affirmations, but actually giving affirmations to somebody else is as powerful in our own lives as it is for those receiving it. And so I think, you know, my challenge to people, especially in this uncertain world that we live in, is to say, go out there with the purpose of finding greatness in those around you and make sure that you point it out to them. You know, so lots of affirmation and lots of belief in other. And this is not just believing in people we work with. This is also, you know, believing in our children and our families. And you know, there's a lot of discussion in the world around the uneven distribution of wealth in the world. But the ability to believe in others, be it your children or be it your colleagues, is priceless, and it costs no money. So everyone can do it. And I think the world will be a lot better if we all did a lot more of it.
Well, Margaret, thank you so much for sharing your insights and your wisdom into the future of leadership and paying it forward, sharing your story and reminding us that simplicity and storytelling are so important for leading in this new economy.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nick, and thank you for the wonderful work that you do.